Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I don't know how you pronounce her last name, dude. I just finished reading this book. I'm lying. I finished reading it about 5 days back, and I wanted to just do a little video review of what I thought about the book, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. First off, let me tell you what I didn't like about it. I didn't dislike anything about the book because it's one of those classics which are structured very well. The story and the narrative is very sensible and sensitive, and immediately you're absorbed by the writing. For example, the very first few chapters, I thought, wow, she's writing very well, and some of the characters and their way of looking at life is just unquestionable. You can't put a question on it. And that's what I felt about more or less all of the book. It's a story of this very young girl who is very ill-treated by her adopted family. Well, she's been adopted by a family, and her stepmother or her caretaker, her guardian, doesn't take care of her at all. And her name is Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Reed has 3 children, and then she has our friend Jane, and she doesn't take care of Jane at all. And Jane, in the entire book, feels unloved. No, is unloved, but she never feels it. She never makes a big deal out of it, and till the end she never makes a big deal out of it, because in Jane, she goes through a very tough time in life, and eventually she realizes that this is the only way life is. You gotta fight and face the demons instead of backing out of situations. So despite being very, very average looking, despite being very destitute and having no real fortune, we see in Jane somebody with a marble countenance and an outstanding way of looking at things. And there is a certain kind of honesty in this author's writing which I really resonated with. I thought it was a very honest book with very honest, believable circumstances. Of course, there was some flair towards the end, and I felt, okay, will that really happen in real life? Will that really happen in real life? But more or less, for most of Jane Eyre, it is a very believable story. You can actually believe that this happened to somebody. So it's not going to be like, hey man, that can never happen to anybody. How the hell is the author writing about that? That's not what the story is about. I like the writing a lot. I thought the central character of Jane Eyre is most unique and different, and I like that a lot. I loved the character of another one of the characters, one of the central characters. I really liked reading about them because every time they came on the scene, on the picture, on the focus, they were amazing. There were some other characters which were a bit disjointed, but they all seemed to make sense in the end. There is some suspense in the book. I want to give it 3 stars out of 5, and it's a very respectable 3 stars out of 5. I say 3 stars because I don't want to say stuff like, hey man, I didn't like it more, or hey man, it didn't move me now, or hey man, it's not a memorable book. Believe me, it's a memorable book, but I felt that it didn't challenge me as a reader enough. It is a story which I have read in many different shapes and ways and forms many times in my life. It's probably a little more crusted than those. Would I have liked this if I read it 10 years back? You know what? I realized something about myself. I'm just not one of those people whose opinion on books change over time. If I like you in 10 years back, I'll probably like you today. Because somewhere my moral compass and my judging compass remains the same. Jane Eyre is it's a kind of a big book, but I read this after reading The Count of Monte Cristo, so it took me about 7 days again to finish this book. I don't recommend this book. I don't want you to read it. I'm just going to give it 3 stars out of 5, and I'm just going to leave the room by saying it's a good book. It's worth reading. I'm glad I ticked it off from my to-read lists. I have to read Wuthering Heights, which is surprisingly written by her sibling. Who would have guessed? Yeah, man. So that's my review for Jane Eyre, and I hope you liked it. I hope I helped one of you out there. Bye now.